Okay, today we're going to go over our workbook here, and we're going to start on page 13. And what I did is I created a variation of the problem that it gives us. As you can see, I labeled my graph. They did not label their graph like this. But this will just apply a little bit of meaning as to what is going on here. When it gave me the speed of car A, if you look in your workbook, you'll see it gives you the speed of car A on there as well. You'll notice I kind of worked my way backwards from 5 meters per second. This is basically a division sign if you think about it like that. So, and we know that since this letter is all by itself, there's an invisible 1 in front of it. So you can think of it as, that means the same as that. Another thing we notice in this problem is it talks about speed, and perhaps it's ringing a bell, but I told you that slope and speed mean the same thing, as well as rate of change. So that's rate of change. Sometimes they'll just use the word rate as well. So we got slope equals sleep. Apparently the teacher's asleep here. Slope equals speed. Oh man, I need to go back to work, guys. So slope equals speed equals rate of change. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind is, and this will make this problem go so much easier if you just know this. The steeper the line, the greater the speed. So this one's traveling at a faster speed than this. And if you remember that speed and slope mean the same thing, that should make sense to you, because remember when we were dealing with slope, we emphasized throughout the entire year, that you always want to put the up and down over the left and right, the rise over the run. So the slope of this blue line here is 5 over 1, which is why I put that as 5 over 1. So in here it's written as slope form, 5 over 1, and in here it's written in speed form. But technically they're the same thing. Okay, so that's telling you something that when you go back in your book and you look at this, going to tell you something along the lines of what's going on. So we should know something now about the speed, that this one's faster than this one. Now hopefully you can remember this as well. We dealt with something called slope-intercept form, also known as the equation of a line. And I told you that whenever you're dealing with the equation of a line, you're dealing with this little template right here. Now generally they write that as y equals mx plus b, but sometimes those letters confuse people. M is an abbreviation, believe it or not, they use for slope. B is an abbreviation they generally use for y-intercept. So y-intercept is the place where it crosses the y-axis, so right where it crosses that y-axis, that would be your y-intercept right there at 0. So now I'm looking at my answer choices here, and I realize something. I can see that this is almost in this form. In fact, if I add a 0 to that, this here will be in that form. And because we said, again, this one is your slope, that one's your y-intercept, then slope means the same thing as speed. So that means the speed of this right here would be 5 meters per second. The up and down label also goes on top. The left and right label also goes on the bottom. Okay, so hopefully you remember as well. So if I did the same thing with this one, I can add a 0 because I can add a 0 to anything without changing the value. But hopefully you guys remember that a negative slope always does that. So the second you see that this is the same as this template over here, that's half the battle. So we know that this cannot be a negative slope. And the question specifically says, which equation would be best for describing car B? So the equation that would be best for describing car B in this example, in my example, would be this one right here. Because when I put it into this template, the speed is 1/5. Remember, the up and down goes on top, the left and right goes on the bottom. And wherever it crosses the y-axis, add 0. And your multiple choice just decided to leave the 0 off since 0 doesn't really hold any significance. So the answer in my example would be y equals 1/5 x plus 0 or y equals 1/5 x.